this ought to give you some indication how much thought they put into it.
Yes.
Welland,
Yes.
believe it or not, is a term for a widowmaker within the medical community.
No.
Yeah. So
Okay.
anyway, back to your
Okay.
yonder discussion. I call it Legacy Northport, not yonder.
Well, I'm from Miami, and that's,
Okay.
from back in the day. Okay, so when you start building on that theory, and it is a true theory, I sat and opposed what was going on, and I've seen it occurring. Now you have a cash cow that the new city from November 2016 has been able to reach into to pay their bills. Victor and I just did a podcast about Panacea. That was a campaign promise by Ms. McDowell and Chris Hanks to the people way out in Panacea that has nothing to do with West Villages, that if the people in Panacea would vote them into office, and there was a pledge, what they called it, then they would transfer the landscaping and maintenance costs, which were private costs, to the people of Northport.
So it's
That's cool.
like transferring all the West Villages Parkway to be maintained by the city. That's what happened in a CDD there. The main road was transferred, to be maintained.
But now the road was supposed to be, that's in the original development order. So we had no problem transferring the road, the sidewalks, and the bike path. What was not in the original development order and
Was a landscape maintenance.
was landscape and irrigation. So they transferred landscaping to us, the taxpayers, meaning you're paying for, and they also, by the way, decided we're going to mow the property. There was no development. We're going to mow the property twice a month, and we're going to edge twice a month for these people on Panacea, and you're paying for it. Has nothing to do with West
The whole
Villages.
city, you are saying.
Correct, but when
So that's no different than what the Improvement District Board was doing on behalf of the developers, is that they would irrigate the miles of road, whether it be West Villages Parkway, Prado
US
Boulevard,
41.
Claymore, US 41. They were doing all of that on the shoulders and expense of those individuals that were actually paying for the irrigation water. Now, 41, everyone should have a responsibility for paying for that. When you look at the amount of revenue that they took in, over 65% of the revenue came from one community, and that was Grand Paradiso.
At that time, yeah.
Well, no, still today. I mean, until we got the injunction, we were paying on average 65% of the revenue that they received.
Correct, but with the expanding communities, the percentage will decrease.
But the communities you're talking about are all in West Villages.
They are.
Correct.
But for a year, you had Prado Boulevard that was fenced off. You had West Villages Parkway that was fenced off. You had Minnesota Key Beach Road that was fenced off. But guess what? It was landscaped. It had the irrigation installed. It was being watered and maintained. And by whom? By the district.
So the district, the irrigation costs
were assumed by the residents, the users.
The common grounds of the district are the majority. And if you take the big arteries, they are consuming the most of the water. Who was paying the most because we were the biggest community, Grand Paradiso, not Island Walk, because they were not assessed for irrigation. We paid the most of those bills.
See, so you're not only paying like this.
Not only our community, not only Panacea, but we also pay.
Correct. So what I'm trying to point out is, off the backs of West Villages, our taxes in yonder part of the city are being addressed. And I'm going to put it that way because once you all contract out, people have no idea how much their taxes are going to go up, and it has to.
Well, I mean, the city's going to lose,
right, just
off of ad valorem, not including non-ad valorem, for trash as well as for fire and EMS, over $6 million a year.
Yep.
What amazes me, because when I came in 2017, the city manager office was very contained, about $200,000 budget. Now it's over $500,000, and we have another assistant city manager. And I think the mindset is that because the city grows, they have to expand the government proportionally. That's not true. It doesn't have to be because the city manager is not direct proportional. He doesn't add me technically if I have another 10,000 citizens. So I'm taking that example because that is replicated throughout the budget. Now, in a period of uncertainty, economic, and not knowing what's happening with the West Village, you would consider that refraining for expanding certain departments and so forth will be at the top priority. The problem is the city. That's why I blame the government and the elected official, because the city manager would always play the tricks. They will say, I need these zillions to get a percentage of that. Actually, the elected official should say, you should stay in this box, and they should determine. That should be the process, not the city manager dictating what it should be, because this will be a never ending. And the major problem, as I underline it all the time, the city has the legacy as being designed as a bedroom community with 70,000 plus plotted lots with minimum lead for economic development. So if the people don't wake up, because there will be a day when the train will hit the wall. Right. The development will cease, and then the only way to maintain or to sustain such a bureaucratic city then will be only by raising taxes. Right. And that's why these West Villages for responsible government tailor the expenditures, the government to what the people need, and don't overtax.
But that's exactly how the government was set up, and that's the government that we were in. But because of a political movement, I guess you'd say in 2016, it was meant to and did totally wipe out the government as it stood. And the government was remade, complete with a new charter. They're still, after 7 years, rewriting the ULDC, which is land law, and they're doing it on the dais, and these are people that have no qualifications, and they have also compromised the comprehensive plan. So that's why when I saw this West Villages for responsible government, I said, that's exactly how you need to address this. This is an irresponsible government, and it is a brand new government. So a couple of other things, if you don't mind, I would like to let the people of West Villages know they're paying for, besides this landscaping of Panacea, which, by the way, a lot of the land is owned by developers. And so there are also, we had to pay for the pool. Your people had to pay for that public pool that everybody voted against, 3-1. So that was hung on to you all. And with the attendant annual deficit, what's coming up now is water and sewer for the lots in the city has nothing to do with you. You're going to help pay for it, $950 million that Barbara Langdon pointed out just 6 months ago, or maybe 8 months ago. So because you're sitting out here, they know that they have your money coming in, and it's still coming in, right? I mean, you sued them 2 years ago.
So the only monies they have are the excess revenue from taxes, above and beyond the cost of providing services. We don't have any control what they choose to spend those dollars on.
That's right.
Period. So if they want to use that for city, for water drainage, for storm drainage, whatever they want, that's entirely upon them. We don't have any say-so on what it goes towards. That being said, at the end of the day, the city ought to focus on those things that are going to make a material impact to the safety and well-being of the citizens. And I've yet to see them do that in any demonstrative fashion.
Yeah. Well,
other than looking at some of the weirs and the drainage, right? I mean they're putting their finger in a dike to stop the leaking. They're not making any significant headway. They're more concerned about Price Boulevard and I haven't been around since that whole discussion about widening it started 30 years ago. They're now finally doing that by issuance of a bond, right?
Let me
correct. It was approved.
But let me throw in there, when I was in office in 2014, Rhonda DeFranco sat on MPO, And I have the document, I put it out, I'll do it in a slower version next time. And MPO had committed millions of dollars to price widening. And once we got out of office, that went away. They used it for something else because we had no more advocate in MPO. We had people sitting on the board, but Rhonda was an advocate, and she made sure that that money was put on the roster to be spent for us. Gone. Millions of dollars.
So the bottom line, irresponsible governance, put the money which should have been used for price on pet projects. And that's what it's.
And we had money
Connect.
saved up for the rears.
War Mineral Springs is a great example.
We talked
I mean,
about
in
that.
2019, when you look at their forecast budget back in 2019, they had $25 million earmarked for capital improvements for War Mineral Springs.
Yes.
And nothing against War Mineral Springs. I know people love to go there. I applaud them. I want them to enjoy it, but they shouldn't do so at my expense or other taxpayers
That's the whole point.
who have no desire to go there.
Correct. Well, bottom line, War Mineral Springs can be a functional amenity. The way it was operated, they could have extended that and refurbished the building, but I don't want to go there because we discussed this subject a few times.
Yeah.
Sure.
But getting again to the WV4RG, which is West Villagers for Responsible Government, I think people have to know what's happening with the main initiative of the
So let's get
this
back to that.
organization.
Great question. So we just filed back in December, another writ of certiorari based upon when the city had their rehearing in late October of 2022.
It was actually called something different. Let's continue deliberations.
Continued deliberations. So they reopened the hearing,
Yes.
but they only reopened it for deliberations only.
Right.
This is after when the judge ruled in our favor against the city.
Twice.
3 times he opined in his order that nothing prevented them from reopening the hearing to receive additional evidence and testimony.
Right.
And he did so because he stated in his final order that there was not competent substantial evidence on the record to support any findings that it was not feasible and that it did not qualify for contraction under Florida statute guidelines, 171. So at the end of the day, they kicked the can down the road. They decided to do it their way instead of the right way,
The new government.
for which we filed a writ of certiorari. The city then asked for an extension to respond because they now have new legal counsel, which the court granted them. And then we filed our response to them. We finally got a court hearing date. That's July 3rd of this year with Judge Brewer. A lot of people are concerned about, well, is Judge Brewer going to be as fair as Judge Carroll? It's not a matter of being fair. It's about following the law and what the law says. And there's no room for interpretation. A statute is a statute.
Right.
And there's intent within statutes. And when the intent says X, it means X. When it says the word shall, no different than the 10 Commandments. Thou shalt not steal. What's that mean? You don't steal. Thou shalt hold a meeting. They're going to have to hold a meeting. We also just filed a writ of mandamus last week. And in that mandamus, that is used for extraordinary motions when there's no other relief available. When I say relief, there's no other way to resolve it without going and requesting the court for mandamus. And that mandamus, basically, we're asking the court to say, will you make the city perform their ministerial duties? And their ministerial duties are, if they're petitioned for contraction and the area qualifies for a contraction, they shall adopt or they shall schedule a hearing for consideration of adoption of an ordinance for contraction. And if at that meeting, a petition is submitted by 15% of those voters within the area being proposed for contraction, submit a petition for a referendum, the municipality shall schedule a referendum.
Okay, so you filed one previous to this one you're talking about.
We filed a mandamus back in 2020,
Right.
and the court ruled that it was premature
Okay.
because he'd already remanded it back to the city.
Okay.
So he has been twice there.
So is this the mandamus you're acting on now? Is the one that was filed?
No, this is
No,
a
it's
new
a new
mandamus.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, with a lot more information to it,
Okay.
a lot more causes of action of where the city has abused their position as being the tribunal for consideration of a petition for contraction. And we are very confident that the court is going to rule in our favor. And then we have another, we expect the city's going to appeal it again. Again, we'll fight that. We have complete confidence that they're going to uphold that for us. But I'd also at this time like to let everyone know we need financial support.
Okay.
So contributions, this is all done on voluntary basis with contributions. We are at about a 7 or 8 to 1 ratio of dollars spent compared to the city of Northport and developers, meaning for every dollar we spent, they spent 7 or 8.
Of our dollars.
So we've been very fiscally responsible, and we are good stewards of those donations. We appreciate it. We also had to spend money on a lobbyist, and that lobbyist was critical in that this legislation, it was House Bill 653 and Senate Bill 718, which is basically turning the Florida Statute 171 upside down.
Right.
Was championed by lobbyists for the Florida Home Builders Association and League of Cities to enable them to do land grabs whenever they wanted to with no checks and balances in place to be able to stop them. And even when those checks and balances are in place, it defers to the city to consider things such as financial impact to the city and gives them the ability to vote it down.
In other words, they can go like they're doing in Northport. They can spend $950 million on a water and sewer system, and still you have to pay for it. Now you can contract that and say, we don't want to pay for your foolishness. If this 718, SB 718 passes, you won't have that luxury in the future. You're going to have to pay.
That's
Communities.
other communities. So, and that's where our lobbyist was so critical. He got an amendment inserted into the legislation that made the intent of it prospective. So any petition submitted prior to the effective date would not fall under the new legislation. So we're grandfathered in. Doesn't make the legislation any better. It's just terrible legislation. In fact, we feel like we may have succeeded. The proof is in the pudding right now. It's been voted on by both the House and Senate and approved. It's waiting to be sent to the governor's office. We solicited residents to write and call. And as a result of that, the governor's office has received so much communication. In fact, it's in the top 5 of all legislation communications that they've received. And ours is not nearly as controversial. And when you think about the small number of constituents that it impacts, the fact that we're in the top 5 speaks volumes.
So it's an historical shift from what it used to be, defending the rights of the people who lived in that land to make a determination. And I will go further, John, if I will, or anybody contacts the Governor DeSantis' office to make it clear that other states such as Georgia, Tennessee, and others, they don't rip off the voter rights on that point of view, on the same thing. We had a historical precedence here. We had a law which gave the right to the voter to self-determine their future when things were done illegally. So why should that be handed to nameless corporation, entities which might be foreign corporation, which is one of in this
and when
case.
You say foreign, you mean not just necessarily domestic foreign, but international.
International. When I say non-American corporation who own land, like Chinese, for example, or Russian, in Florida, they can determine. So think of it like that, because Russians and Chinese corporations are buying land in the United States. So we still have some left, fortunately, some land in Florida, but think about that.
Right, and what's ironic is Governor DeSantis is now running for president. And one of the top contenders, of course, is former President Trump. And you kind of wonder, if you throw that conversation into a debate, well, if Governor DeSantis signs this, then that would kind of give him leave people with a bad taste in the mouth.
I personally will judge him on that for sure. So many people, I think, they will be looking into situation. Did you side with corporation, foreign countries, entities, or you sided with the people who really pleaded to do the right thing?
And John, can you tell people where to mail those checks real quick before we forget?
What's that?
Can you tell people where to contribute?
That's where I was going to go. Please go to our website, WV4RG.org.
Okay.
And there'll be a donate and contact button where that'll tell you where you can send your donation to, or they can send an email to WV4RG2020 at gmail.com. And we now have the ability to accept Zelle. So if somebody wants to transfer money via Zelle, reach out to us and we'll give you the instructions for that.
And all those documents that you talked about, or a lot of them, they're on your
And we've updated our website. Thank you to Eric Coymans and Victor for helping with that. We certainly appreciate it. But it's a team effort, and there's a lot of great people. The list just keeps growing longer and longer. You have Tom Desane, John Conklin, Chip Adams, Jennifer,
Paul Kale,
Paul Kale, Jen Zambrano.
There are many. Sorry that if you don't remember.
Yeah,
all of them.
Julia Sneed, Seamus, Kathy Smolik. Who else am I missing? God, there's so many. Tony Russo. I mean, the list goes on and on.
But again, those are people who are really involved. More often than others. There are the supporters, thousands of them, which we
Bob Baker, another one. Yep,
correct. But
Steve Bowman.
There are people who have left and they are living in Northport and they are still supporting this because they think that it's the right way.
Like me, I live there and I'm thinking it's the right thing. So tell us briefly what can the people yonder in Northport, what can we expect once you can try? And by the way, that is a legitimate term for me.
Yeah. So what can you expect?
Let me be more clear. Okay, we know that new boundaries will need to be drawn. Is that first? Are the services transferred first? Are the taxes cut off? What's the organization?
So it's a transitional period.
Okay.
So it doesn't happen like flipping the light switch. You don't go to bed one night and wake up the next morning and you're no longer the part of the city of Northport. In fact, the statute says that all liabilities and assets must be transferred. Doesn't say may, it say must.
Okay.
Shall. 10 commandments shall be transferred. That includes the new safety building. That includes the water treatment plant. That includes the wastewater treatment plant. That includes all roads, although the city of Northport has no roads that I'm aware of that they maintain.
You all paid for on your own roads, right?
Right here.
Yeah. No.
Yeah, so I don't believe there's any roads that they're going to transfer. They're not going to have to remove that sign at Tamiami and River Road that says Northport 3 miles, so that gets to stay. So they'll save a little bit of money there.
I think the county paid for most of that.
And actually, it was the state because it's 41's a state highway,
So,
right? But let me finish what I said. So that transition, it's going to occur over time. It's going to be a collaboration of the city and the county working together. They're gonna paint a picture as if the sky is falling.
Right.
It's not. Any employees that work for the city that want to come work for the county because they like that wastewater treatment plant or they like the fire department or they like the sheriff's department, I'm sure there'll be opportunities to do some cross hiring and transition of those employees. Those that want to stay with Northport can go to Northport. But at the end of the day, it's a business.
Yeah,
Government is a business.
Yes, right.
Yeah, and you transfer, the firefighter services, you have to pay either in the city or in the county. You are assessed on your non-ad valorem. So it's just a shift from one employer to another.
Right,
But
it's
again-
not. It isn't just a shift. Because what I'm wondering is, when are the boundaries drawn, for one thing? Because Northport is now it's the first name on the regional, I'm not sure what the name of it is, it's Northport, Bradenton, et cetera. They're gonna now go to the end of the line. The Myakkahatchee, the Myakka Forest will no longer be in Northport. They will no longer be able to sell houses in Northport based on population. Also, once the boundaries are drawn, the commissioners' salaries are going to go down because they presented a formula to themselves to give themselves a raise based on population, and the formula is taken out of Sarasota County. So once you all are out, they're going to have to lower their salaries. So those are other considerations.
Yeah, but
So-
I'm not worried about
Yeah, no,
their
I mean, do you want to bring
salaries.
tissues to the meeting when they have to lower their salaries?
Yeah,
Honestly, at the end of the day, it is what it is. Eyes wide open. There is going to be a contraction of the
Yeah,
boundaries.
I
When
agree.
those boundaries are redrawn,
Yeah.
again, it's not something that happens overnight. There'll be much more proper planning than I've ever seen from the city do for even Hurricane Ian, right? So, and there'll be but
it's a long process.
it's a
and
long
what happens-
process. But the sky's not falling as much as they say it's going to be falling.
Right.
And if they would act like fiscally mature adults
Right.
and look at, I've asked them numerous times, what's your contingency plan?
Correct.
That's what my
And
question
no one at the city has ever told me that they've ever sat down and even entertained a contingency plan. To me, that's irresponsible.
That's what I've been telling people.
Yeah, they should have since 2020, when this issue came on their front on the dais, they should have started planning their expenditure accordingly. But no effort has been done.
Victor talked about throughout his campaign
Yeah.
8 months ago. What are you going to do if and when this happens? And they're spending more money.
Well, I
on
hope
water and
this
sewer.
budget cycle, but I haven't followed it. And let's see what happens in September, October. If they do, let's see.
I apologize.
Okay.
It's my time to run out for today, but
Okay.
I do appreciate. Do you have any other questions before I take off?
No, do you have anything you want to add?
No, again, I'd just like to thank both of you for affording me an opportunity to come and share with you the thoughts of not only myself, but also of West Villagers for Responsible Government. And again, encourage people to participate in local government as much as possible, because it makes a difference, whether it be at the improvement district level or at the city level or at the county level. Participate, because that's the only way you get your voices heard.
And
Or even the HOA sometime.
Correct.
It's WD
WV4RG,
number 4.
WV4RG.org, or WV4RG2020 @gmail.com.
Gmail. Okay.
Okay,
All right.
thank you,
Thank
John.
you very much, Victor.
Thank you.
Thank you,
for
Cheryl.
joining us.
Appreciate it.